the North Star, or that central star around which everything rotates. If you notice that these are actually menuetchas, they're hieroglyphics. And each time they appeared and became prominent on the dome, there was an influence that the light was transduced through. Now, if you look at them, you see that just like a computer circuit, you will see that this is essentially nothing more than a divestiture of certain programs. That each one of these light fixtures, that's what I call them, light fixtures, just like you have light fixtures in your home that give you a certain light, these light fixtures transduce and, what's a better word, formulate and qualify light, so that as they become prominent to us wherever the sun is, their influence begins to give us information regarding how the tapestry of the brain's own, what you call synapses. So if you look at them, you see that each one of the dots, which is essentially what look like, they say, stars, these are synaptic linkages to particular light codes that are traveling along a specific vector that we pick up in the brain. Because if you look at the brain and the way the synapses are linked, and you look at the way that the brain's own neurological system is structured, if you can actually get in and concentrate on certain parts, they look just like the stars in the dome. So depending on who your parents are, who you're born, and what you do, because you're not condemned by your genetics. You can always change it. Genetics are psychoreactive. Your mind can change genetics. Yes. Okay? So what happens is when you begin to align to your more spiritual self, you find yourself aligning more and more to the tapestry of light that's above us. And you begin to have certain inspirations. Inspire means to breathe. The word inspire or breath, to inspire, is Latin for espiritu, which means to breathe. So you become inspired through the breath, because the breath of life is all there is right now. You're not the Mickey D of life. You're not the what is it, the Wendy's of life and stuff like that. None of that is really what you are. You are a light being that uses electromagnetism and transduces information through light and sound waves, using the water in your body as a conductor to channel light wave and light code information to your genetics that become the program orientation for you to rise in consciousness. So it's up to you how you delete from yourself as much of the earthly poisons that are in your blood, so that the more you begin, people know that when you go on a fast, there's this euphoric, well, first of all, it's health, because your addictions come out, it's a withdrawal process. So when you begin to cleanse the body, the first thing that happens is that your appetites change. You begin to start wanting things that are more alive. Things taste differently. They become more of instead of the dulled by the different spices you use and peppers and salt, these numb the tongue. But when you begin to allow that coating that is created, that the tongue creates to protect itself against all these spices and all these salts and all this crap we take, all of that mucus lining that built up from all of those poisons begins to slough off. And you become so sensitive. You smell things from way away. You taste things. You hear things much more clearer. And so now that your senses become a lot more acute, the light codes become more present in your life. The sun becomes more of a projector of consciousness rather than just light and heat. So you now, by your breath, you're taking in the effluvium or the effluage that the sun gives in the form of plasma. You're breathing that in. That is the food of the gods that you're taking in through the breath. That's why in yoga, and the masters of yoga, the breath was extremely important. The breath is extremely important in raising Kundalini. But we are in environments that are so saturated with poisons, not just industrial poisons, but thought poisons. We are living under a saturation of fear. Fear consciousness creates fear molecules that you breathe in. And most people don't know that because they think that fear is just a personal thing. No, you're emanating. That's why animals smell your fear.
This is beautiful, family. This is the science of what's going on. What the fuck? I'm sorry for my language. Let me put this link right. Hold on. This dude here. Come on, man. We don't have scientists like this. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Doc. Go ahead, Doc. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Just kind of wrapping it, that these different names that are given to these signs of the zodiac, they have different names depending on the culture. Our Ethiopian or our Cushitic civilizations that went over to become India, and the ones that the Cushitic civilizations that went on to become Kemet, we all had different names for them, but they all knew, all the ancient melanated civilizations knew that the earth was our mother, and that our father wrote our instructions for what it is that our tasks are to be fulfilled in the spirit, in the stars. So we studied them judiciously. We understood what the day meant. We understood what the change in the weathers meant. We understood when to grow. We weren't really eating until we were isolated in this dome. Remember, everything is water, family. Everything is water. The air you're breathing is water. It's a form of water. You are a form of water condensed. You are a molecular agreement that consolidated around a purpose. And that consolidation is the intention of the One Most High, to know about itself. And as you know yourself, as you grow in knowledge of self, it grows in that knowledge and feeds you your tasks, feeds you your wants. As long as you stay the course, as long as you are balanced and you know love in everything that you do, and you don't expect constant rewards for everything you do, like the European wants you to believe. This is why our world is the way it is. Everybody wants something for doing the right thing. You gotta keep doing the right thing. Can you imagine? I found that out. I was supposed to be in music. I was supposed to be doing my artwork. I was supposed to be even drawing for Marvel comics. But if I did not do this, family, I was homeless for three times. Homeless, hungry, didn't have a place to stay because I was pursuing something that my contract said. Wait a minute. Line so-and-so said that you ain't supposed to be doing this. You did this in your past life. That's why you do it so good. You can sing, you can write music, you can draw your ass off. You did that. This was the contract you buying for yourself.
Yeah. You know what I want to ask you, what you saying, man?
All right, so a couple things I want to take away from this is, number one, I appreciate how he broke down that these star constellations that we see on the dome are connected to our neurons and connected to our brain, and we perceive them and see them more greatly depending on where we are in the hologram of the universe. So for a lot of people that don't believe in astrology or astronomy, it's funny that they don't see the science behind how the stars over our head are actually reflections of what's going on in us. So what I want to do to add on to what he was talking about when it comes to the light code transmissions, I want to add on a little bit from the perspective of Kemet when we talk about how the scribe was told by the deceased king to destroy writings, and he requested the scribe to be replaced, and the deceased king also bears a book which we are referring to as the Great Word. And so what is this really talking about? So hold on, let me put this on screen real quick. So this is what we are really talking about. Specifically, the four base pairs of our DNA: guanine, cytosine, adenine, and thymine. The words as DNA instructions. In order to discover how the deceased sun god restores the eye of Horus, we need to understand the signs suggesting DNA transcription and repair, keeping in mind the continued coherence and unity of our expanded matrices. Transmitting messages in biology is electrolytic and can be described as the migration or flow of ions down electrical gradients. So we could say that the journey of the sunbark through the duat simulates the flow of ions or a supramolecular message navigating the protein gradients. Recall that the deceased is one who reveals what has been said to him. He also, quote, dispatches the word of the self created to the multitudes and captains the bark, Coffin Text 75. Mine is the writing, Coffin Text 137. He insists, and I am in charge of the record of the word of God, Coffin Text 351. This is the world which was in darkness. As for any spirit who knows it, he will live among the living. Fire is about it, which contains the efflux of Oser, Coffin Text 1087. So the word in darkness is Oser, the DNA of lambda prophage on the host chromosome, and efflux relates to the potential outflow of phage progeny, which is just reproductions of itself, related to the induction of the prophage at the point of return to the origin of time or the foundation of forms, Kepra, or the first DNA, solar star viral. The deceased states that as heir of the horizon Atum, he speaks and prepares a path for Ra when he comes to a halt. Coffin Text 1174. The application of the word of Atum is the activity of DNA replication and information transfer processes. So when we talk about the word of God or the Meduneter, the word of Atum, he talked about how these constellations are Meduneters. They are essentially hieroglyphics. And that is exactly what the hieroglyphics are. They are signaling how DNA replicates and how information is processed biologically on a quantum level. Continuing, all these textual references use the idea of speech and words to point to the lambda DNA instructions. So let me pull up a picture of a lambda real quick in case, you haven't seen one in a long time. Here we go. The deceased bears the word of God, the lambda DNA of the Horus lineage, which now supplants the DNA of the human or the Seth lineage. So the whole point of all of this is to use our ability as gods to create our own self-steering evolution through the power of our word, through the manipulation of our genetics, so that we at death can transform our human DNA out of the Seth lineage into the Horus species, which will then make us immortal beings. The word equals DNA instructions of Horus lineage. By decoding word as lambda DNA instructions, we can now understand the idea of copying words or DNA transcription. Reviewing the references to the words in the Amduat, the process of DNA transcription and replication is explained in terms of uttering words, copying words, and destiny because of words, hours 1 through 7, resulting in the subsequent translation to protein, hours 8 through 10. Similarly, biologists commonly use the metaphor of words to refer to the process in which the DNA instructions are translated from the language of nucleic acid into the language of protein, that is, from nucleotides to amino acids. In the cell, is a translation engine that converts the nucleotide words into amino acids words. Likewise, genetic engineers clone books for genomic libraries. When the deceased states, I shall live forever, I am he who dispatches the word of the god Sarah. I have come that I may report a message to his recipient. Coffin text 1176. The deceased is reporting the message, his DNA or genetic heritage, to the sun god Ra, who together with the deceased may represent the initiation of transcription by the enzyme RNA polymerase, the most pervasive form of gene regulation from bacteria to higher eukaryotes. Decoded, copying words equals DNA transcription into messenger RNA. DNA-directed RNA polymerase. Idea strand 49 through 50. The deceased sun god is Thoth and authority. Thoth and book splits open mouth. Thoth cuts off the head of Set and his followers. Idea strands 51 through 52. Thoth gleams the eye of Horus, crosses the sky with the deceased and Ra, and reassembles the deceased. DNA-directed RNA polymerase synthesizes RNA. It is an enzyme that is evolutionary conserved across all domains of life in terms of function, structure, and sequence. This core enzyme in bacteria synthesizes RNA from a DNA template. It has 4 polypeptide subunits, but it cannot initiate transcription by itself because the core enzyme does not recognize promoters. Another protein, the sigma subunit, binds to it to form the hollow enzyme. The sigma subunit tells RNAP where in the genomic DNA to start transcription by recognizing a section of the gene's DNA called the promoter region. It then melts the DNA to expose one of the double helical strands the RNAP will use as the template to synthesize RNA. As mentioned, phage lambda takes over the replication machinery of the host cell, and geneticists theorize that replication for phage lambda begins with recombination, which the Egyptian evidence supports. Thus, it seems logical to propose that the god Thoth represents this activity of copying words, that is, transcription and replication within the host cell. Thoth was a divine messenger, and the Greeks associated him with Hermes Trismegistus. In the first dynasty, he is associated with the dog-headed baboon, while in later periods he is in his ibis form, carrying a pen and a palette of the scribe. Thoth is the lord of the sacred lion and the reenactment of divine speech. He is also responsible for beheading Seth and his followers, suggesting the power of his DNA transcription over that of Seth's eye, which produces the human species. Thoth is also present with the deceased sun god, crossing the sky, performing the duties of a scribe, that is, transcription and replication in the earth host cell. Once again, the text claimed the deceased sun god is Thoth because of non-locality, a quantum phenomenon where the motion of atoms simultaneously affects and relies on the motion of neighboring atoms. However, for ease of understanding, we will treat Thoth as a separate unit and assign him the status of DNA-directed RNA polymerase. The deceased prepares a path for Ra when he comes into a halt. That is, he helps the sun god start again after stopping. In the quantum world, ultraviolet damage of DNA can produce thymine dimers, which block replication and transcription. In other words, the RNA polymerase idles at the site. A gap is left opposite the thymine dimer, which will be lethal because in the next round of replication, it would generate a double strand break. So Thoth, with his famous capacity for writing and wisdom, may also represent the activity of a polymerase that enables transcription or the word of the sun god to proceed past an ultraviolet-induced thymine dimer. As mentioned, the deceased king who crosses the sky with Thoth and Ra also becomes the polymerase that replicates past the damaged site. But if this is the scenario referenced by the funerary text, then what is the Egyptian meta symbol for the thymine dimer? So I'm going to stop there and I will pick up in the next video.